A third Charles, a second Grand Remonstrance, and another revolution and turn in the United Kingdom history. And I actually wanted to start by, I have the picture of Charles III's official portrait, which was unveiled earlier this year. The reason I actually wanted to point it out was that it did, in a sense, sort of plant a seed for what would later become the Second Grand Remonstrance, and in part because when I first saw the portrait unveiled, it wasn't that I was liked it or didn't like it. I was a little taken aback though at first because from my standpoint, I was so enmeshed in the history of the build up to the first commercial revolution and the development of the first commercial revolution. For my economic research, I was essentially attempting to re-engineer the first commercial revolution and analyzing how to address many of the proliferation of debt-based instruments and leverage of debt-based instruments from the first commercial revolution. And of course, the history of the first Charles I and Charles II is very important in that build-up and time period. And so I was so enmeshed in that sort of mode of thinking in the history of that time period that when I first saw Charles III's portrait, I was a little bit taken aback, not that I didn't like it, but because the first question that popped into my mind was, why would you use so much red in a Charles portrait? Because also the first connotation that popped into my head was man of blood. And red is a very powerful color in when it's used in art, it can denote many different things. It can denote anger, it can denote love, it can denote passion, but it also can denote human mortality. It is the color of blood, and so it can be as well a color of death as well. And again, I was just a little taken aback by the use of red. It has nothing to do with the term man of blood as it did with Charles I. In fact, it's due to Charles III's affinity for the Welsh Guard and the Welsh Guard regimental uniform, which is red. Now, the question, though, that I ended up asking myself that I was interested in and sort of pondered for a little bit was, what would Charles I say about Charles III's portrait? It's important to note that Charles I, despite any of his flaws, had impeccable art taste. He was not an imposing man. He was born with rickets and was a short man. And also he was the spare. He did not necessarily, from a physical perspective, he was not what many would have at the time considered a monarch in the sense of an imposing figure. But he did utilize art, Charles I did, to portray royal magisterium, and himself very well using many famous artists, and he had very good art taste. And the question I posed to myself was, what would Charles I say about Charles III's portrait? And upon reflecting on it, I personally think that Charles I would have liked Charles III's official portrait, but the title he would have used for Charles III's official portrait would be the monarch unapologetically resplendent in red. And so I did want to just point that out, that was sort of an interesting thing that I was thinking about earlier this year in relation to Charles III's portrait. But what we're going to be discussing much through the rest of this video is the Second Grand Remonstrance. After researching economic and financial theory in relation to the debt bonded slave question, micro and macro, I expanded my research into the social contract question and other political research. I ended up synthesizing a reconceptualization of mass democratic theory in the United Kingdom for Rishi Sunak to run on as Prime Minister, called Tory Democracy 2.0, which you can see in my other video linked below. Even though I was unable to get anywhere with my economic, fiscal, monetary, or political theories and work in the United Kingdom, I still am interested in applying and empowering a reinvigoration of mass democratic politics in the modern age and reinvigorate mass civic engagement. That was what led me to decide to still continue the work and ended up creating the Second Grand Remonstrance as that application of reinvigoration of mass democratic civic engagement. So what I want to do is go ahead and dig into what the Second Grand Remonstrance is, and beginning with the opening to the Second Grand Remonstrance. So in 1774, in Parliament, as debates raged about a bunch of uppity American colonial grievances against taxation, against representation, Edmund Burke, a member of Parliament, would rise in the minority to warn his fellow Parliament members, and I quote, "If intemperately, unwisely, fatally, you sophisticate and poison the very source of government by urging subtle deductions and consequences odious to those you govern from the unlimited and illimitable nature of supreme sovereignty, you will teach them by these means to call that sovereignty into question. If that sovereignty and their freedom cannot be reconciled, which will they take? They will cast your sovereignty in your face. No body of men will be argued into slavery." I would add that Parliament itself, in the face of monarchical tyranny, did not hesitate to do the same, and threw the unlimited and illimitable nature of supreme sovereignty of Charles I back at him and picked up their own liberty. Edmund Burke was a great apostle of liberty and authority depending on the circumstances. He denounced any and all sources of political tyranny and corruption, whether it emanated from the king, parliament, the military, government appointees, private corporations, or tyranny of the mob and tyranny of the masses. If Edmund Burke were alive today, he would stand and denounce a conspiracy of silence by all parties in Parliament to serve their own interests over the interests of the very people they represent and govern. It is the words, warning, and advice of one of the greatest parliamentarians in United Kingdom's history that opens the Second Grand Remonstrance addressed to Parliament from the United Kingdom's citizen, voter, taxpayer, laborer, and shopkeeper. Unlike the first time Edmund Burke's words echoed through Westminster, we hope, pray, and demand that Parliament's members heed Edmund Burke's words a second time. Charles III is not the problem. Parliament is the source of problems, and thus the responsibility and burden of the solutions is the duty of Parliament's members to address and implement. The Second Grand Remonstrance is utilized as the instrument and tool to impress upon Parliament the importance and weight of the grievances listed within. It intentionally parallels the First Grand Remonstrance, which is one of the most important instruments that underpins the sovereignty, rights, and prerogatives of Parliament itself. It is a full turn of the wheel and revolution with some old friends and new faces. The Second Grand Remonstrance stands as a new chapter in the United Kingdom according to and within the United Kingdom's traditions and history, just as Edmund Burke would insist. Parliament's members should not forget they stand in the long shadow of titans long dead, but whose actions still remain relevant today more than ever. The Second Grand Remonstrance's purpose is multiple-fold. It intentionally parallels the First Grand Remonstrance as a symbolic and real vehicle and instrument to empower national citizen civic engagement to aggregate grievances, problems, and abuses, while providing solutions and lobbying those solutions to policymakers. I say it's symbolic and real. It's symbolic in the sense that the first Grand Remonstrance is not just the symbolic instrument, but it becomes the real means by which Parliament becomes the primary decision-making authority. And it is symbolic that the people in aggregate and collective are asserting to Parliament as a reminder that their sovereignty is the source of political decision-making authority. And it is a real vehicle in the fact that the Second Grand Remonstrance utilizes UK citizen support action groups to engage and collectively organize citizens to be able to better collect grievances, problems, and abuses, and then also researching and providing real solutions and lobbying those solutions to policymakers. Again, this is a collective action and organization of the citizens in a mass collective way. It also seeks to hold policymakers accountable long-term to solutions that will positively impact the problems citizens face. So this is not meant to be a one and done sort of instrument in the sense that it's only aggregating and listing grievances and problems. It is meant to be carried forward through other means as well to hold policymakers accountable in the long term to ensure that those problems and grievances are addressed. Otherwise, the risk would be that it is merely sound and fury rather than a vehicle, an instrument for the real positive material change that many citizens would seek. So how does the United Kingdom citizen get involved with the Second Grand Remonstrance? And first thing I want to emphasize and reinforce is that the Second Grand Remonstrance cannot succeed without the actions of you, the individual United Kingdom citizen. Edmund Burke would remind you that the only thing necessary for evil to triumph in the world is that good men and women do nothing. And even if Edmund Burke did not originally state that, he would have said something very similar, no doubt. Also, Margaret Mead would tell you, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. If you look at the histories of the United Kingdom, you will always find that the greatest moments, victories, successes were achieved not by individuals, by the sole actions of a few individuals, but by the national effort and the collective effort of the United Kingdom. For instance, when it came to the actions of abolitionists and the United Kingdom taxpayer voter would collectively agree to end the global slave trade, not just the Atlantic slave trade, but the Muslim Arab slave trade as well, by the action they would pay for it, and they would agree to utilize the strength of the Royal Navy to do so, not just in 1 year, but collectively over the actions of decades. And that just didn't happen. There are many other examples in the United Kingdom's histories where the actions of the total were the only way that the greater successes occurred in UK history. And so there's a lot of different ways for you to get involved. The first example is through, of course, a financial contribution. I created a GoFundMe crowdfunding campaign in order to support the marketing, research, and lobbying efforts. It's important to emphasize that the goal amount, which is of course, has to be determined. The more, the merrier. But the symbolic amount and the goal amount is actually equal to a member of Parliament's salary, which is £91,346 as of April 2024. This is meant to represent the fact that the Second Grand Remonstrance campaign acts as a shadow member of Parliament for the people. It is, again, a manifestation and instrument and vehicle for the people, and the goal being that, well, we'll take a hopeful member of parliament salary in order to start whipping members of parliament into action in order to see the solutions long term implemented on behalf of the people. So this is a sort of shadow MP representative of the national grievances in aggregate. You can also submit your grievances individual through a couple different means, including the website. The website official for the second Grand Remonstrance is www.grandremonstrance2.com. And so you can go there to submit a form. You can also see other information as well. And lastly, and most importantly, you can join, volunteer, or lead a UK National Grand Remonstrance Citizen Support Action Group. Again, it's going to take the actions of you, the individual, to make the change, the real material change that you may seek as a individual citizen. And it can't happen without you. Finally, I wanted to say cheers to the United Kingdom and Merry Christmas to the United Kingdom and happy Second Grand Remonstrance. Tis the season after all. December of 1641 was the first Grand Remonstrance. December of 2024 is the kickoff of the second Grand Remonstrance. Decembers are not just the season of Christmas and holiday joy, it is the season of Grand Remonstrances. I would hope that this is an opportunity for United Kingdom unity, regardless of location, political affiliation, and otherwise. And with Christmas just around the corner, if you're getting together with your family for holiday gatherings, you might take this opportunity to gather the family and submit a grievance all together. Again, not trying to use this as an opportunity to divide, but rather an opportunity to unite together. My hope is that this second Grand Remonstrance will serve as a list of national grievances and abuses heard around the world. Will the old lion of the United Kingdom roar once more, or will it whimper? I know how the dead would answer, but the question remains, what will you do? Will you act or stand idly by and do nothing? The choice is yours. My answer is the same as Benjamin Disraeli. Trust the people. If you are interested in supporting my work, research, and the Crises of Modernity channel, please go to the Buy Me a Coffee link, which is a way to support as just a donation website for my work. And please buy a cup of Joe for Joe, me. And the last question that I sort of ponder, if this second Grand Remonstrance does take off and becomes what I hope it will be, what would Charles III think about this all? But Charles even called himself a caretaker monarch, but that's not true. Charles III's reign is already revolutionary. There is a second Grand Remonstrance. It may not be as important as the first Grand Remonstrance, but it is still important, and it above all represents a new chapter and revolution and turn of the wheel in the United Kingdom's histories. Thank you.